Okay, let's keep on moving here. I'm going to continue right along with where we left off in the previous exercise. So we created this new class rule called image controller, and now I want to actually go and use this guy. I want to go and apply this guy to the graphic. So once again, I hope things are starting to come together for you. Things are starting to gel for you here. So now that I've specified a class, I actually have to go down into my document and specify exactly where I want to use this new class rule. So, of course, I'm going to go and find my first cartoon. There he is there, img src equals. In a very similar way to what we saw earlier, I'm going to go and apply this class rule simply by dropping my cursor into the opening element tag. Notice, by the way, that a graphic only has an opening tag. It doesn't have a closing tag. So I'm going to drop my cursor in there, throw in a space, and I'm going to go class equals, and then in quotes, the name of the class rule that you and I just went and created. So image controller. Watch your capitalization there. Watch your spelling as well. So now I'm targeting this specific image. You could think of it like that. So go ahead and save this file, flip back over to your browser and refresh. And let's see. Well, first of all, the second cartoon no longer has the formatting applied to it. It's just kind of sitting there on its own default. But the first cartoon does have the class rule applied to it. It does have those CSS properties applied to it. That's how it works. So when you start going a little bit further with CSS, when you start getting more comfortable, you start to ask yourself questions. What is it exactly that I want to pull off here? Do I want to format all images, all paragraphs, all heading ones, and so on and so on? Or do I want to target specific objects on my page? I only want to format that first graphic, or I only want to format some of the tables, not all of the tables, or some of the paragraphs, not all of the paragraphs, and so on, right? So I hope that's making sense for you. Now, let's go a little bit further with our CSS. There's a few other neat things I want to show you here in terms of what we can do in terms of formatting our graphics. Well, not too long ago, you were introduced to the float property. So once again, I sometimes think of this as text wrapping. So what I'll do is I'll go and find my new CSS rule, image controller, and I'm going to throw on that float property just like this. I'm going to go float, :space, and then I go, all right, do I want to float this guy on the left-hand side of the screen or over on the right-hand side of the screen? Well, I'm going to float this guy on the left, something like this. Save that up, back over to the browser and refresh. And now we have all of the content that appears below the image now wrapping around the graphic, just like this. So wrapping around the right-hand side of the graphic. And of course, I can always control my spacing. For instance, maybe I want to push this content away from the right edge of my graphic. So what I would do is I'd go and look for my margin. Now, here I'm setting the same value for all four sides. The spacing on the outside is set exactly the same. Or again, I can target a side. I could go margin right, and then maybe increase this value, let's say to 20 pixels, something like this. Save that up, back over to the browser and refresh. And there we go. Now I'm increasing this gap of space on the right-hand side. Let me bring that up even higher so you can get a better idea. There we go, something like that, right? So all of a sudden we're getting very, very precise in terms of what we can do, what we can pull off. Let me show you another neat trick. This is kind of a fun one. I can throw on almost like a background border, if you will, or almost like a double border onto an image. It's kind of cool. I'm actually going to make an adjustment to my existing border property here, the values that I'm using. So I have border. I'm going to go with a 2-pixel black border. I'll show you the results here. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. There we go. Something like that, right? But what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to throw on some padding. And don't forget, padding is the spacing on the inside, right? So I'm going to go padding, :space. And maybe I'll use a padding value of, I'm going to try 10 pixels. There we go. Save that up and refresh. Okay, so now I have a gap of space between the edge of my graphic and where the border begins. Again, spacing on the inside of the rectangular space or the rectangular object. So now what I can do is if I want this double border effect or sort of a photographic border on my image, what I'm going to now do is I'm going to go and specify a background color for this rectangular object, for this image. So here's how it's going to go down. I'm going to flip back over to my code, and I'm going to throw in background, something like this, full colon space. And then you can specify whatever color you want. Now, whatever color you specify is going to show up inside that gap of space. Let me give you a quick example here. If I go red and then refresh, there we go. So now that gap of space is filled in with this red background color, right? So this is actually the background behind the graphic. That's how it's working. But it's giving us sort of this double border effect. So now I have a red border and a black border. But of course, I can go and specify whatever color I want. Maybe I want to go with maybe sort of a light gray. So I'm going to go $CCC, something like this. Maybe I want to make that gray border a little bit thinner. So I'm actually going to go and change the padding value because it isn't really a border, it's spacing, but it gives us the visual appearance of a border. There we go, something like that. So you can really mess around here and you can come up with some pretty cool effects. And I'll leave that up to you. I'm just kind of having some fun here, showing you what's possible. And there we go. There's how you can use CSS to control your imported graphics.